Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Dawn Sturgess inquiry. Could I ask everyone please take their seats? We will be starting very shortly. Would you please check that your mobile phones or any other electrical equipment you have with you are on silent mode? Members of the public and reporters in the hearing room are not permitted to use any electronic devices during the hearing. If you wish to do this, you can do so in the annex. Legal representatives, please remember that though you are allowed to use such equipment in the hearing room, you may not transmit anything to the outside world until 10 minutes after it has been said or displayed. These are important requirements which are the subject of the Chair's ruling and a restriction order. The Chair may also make further restriction orders during the course of evidence. Breach of such orders is a criminal offence. For those viewing in the annex, you will not receive any information until the 10-minute period has elapsed, so you may transmit information as soon as you see it. Please note, no food or drink may be consumed in the hearing room except for water. Those people seated in the public gallery may not cross into the legal team area. If there is a need to pass a message to anyone in that area, please write a note and give it to an usher who will deliver it for you. The usual sitting times for the inquiry are 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. every day. Lunch will be approximately 12:45 to 1:45. There will be short breaks mid-morning and mid-afternoon. Please wear your lanyards and passes at all times within the building, and note that if you leave the secure area of the building, these will need to be handed back. On re-entry, you'll have to undergo a further security search, so time will be limited. Also, please remember that those viewing proceedings in the annex will still have 10 minutes of the hearings to go when we finish here in the hearing room. So please try to be quiet in the entrance lobby as you leave. Our ushers are here to help you, so please ask one of them if you have any questions. Some of the evidence to be heard in this inquiry may be upsetting. We do have volunteers from the Coroner's Court Support Service who are available for confidential discussions if anyone is affected by anything said or shown during these proceedings. We have Cecilia and Lucy here today. Perhaps you could, there they are at the back waving. They are the people to approach. Either approach them directly or ask an usher. Thank you very much. We will be starting proceedings very shortly.
Good morning. Yes, Mr. O'Connor.
Good morning, sir. Our first witness this morning is Mr. Ross Cassidy. Please, can he be sworn?
Please.
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing
but the truth.
but the truth.
Mr. Cassidy, I'm told that the microphones are set up for you seated, so
Yes.
would you care to do
Thank
that?
you.
Thank you very much.
Could you give us your full name, please?
Ross Cassidy.
Mr. Cassidy, thank you for coming to give evidence to the inquiry this morning. As you know, I will be asking you questions for the next hour or so. First of all, about your friendship with Sergei Skripal and his family in Salisbury between about 2010 and 2018. And then also about some particular events at the end of that period in March 2018. Before I get into the detail, if we may, we will just note the three witness statements that you have given over time and that we all have for your evidence. The first of those was made on the 5th of March 2018. If we could have it on screen, please. It's INQ 005774. Thank you. Mr. Cassidy, I know you've looked at this and indeed your other statements in preparation for this morning. If we could go forward to the end of that statement, please. Thank you. So it's 3 pages long, Mr. Cassidy. This version doesn't have a signature on it, but was this the statement that you gave on the 5th of March 2018?
It was.
Thank you. If we could move on to the second statement, please, which you gave a few days later on the 9th of March 2018. It's INQ 005267. Again, Mr. Cassidy, was this a statement that you gave to the police a few days after the events that
Yes,
we'll
it
come to talk to you about? This is rather longer statement. We'll need to go forward to the 5th page to see the end of it. Again, Mr. Cassidy, is that a statement that you've looked back on
Yes.
in preparation for today?
Yeah.
And finally, if we can look at the third statement, which is much more recent, that's INQ 005999. Now, this statement, Mr. Cassidy, was prepared at the request of this inquiry, was it not? Is that right?
Yeah.
And we can see there's the first page, and if we can go over to the second page, we can see underneath that redaction is your signature, and then there's the date of the 18th of September 2024.
Yeah.
And are all of those three statements, Mr. Cassidy, true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, they are.
Thank you. So I wonder if we could formally adduce those statements into evidence.
Yes.
Thank you. Perhaps it's apparent, Mr. Cassidy, from the dates that I've just given, but just before we move on from those statements, as we saw, the first two of those statements were given just a few days after what we now know was the poisoning of Sergei and Yulia Skripal. You gave them to the police.
Yeah.
Was it the case then that the police came and asked you really to tell you everything that you could think of about those few days, your trip to Heathrow and so on?
Yes, they did. Yeah.
And we've seen that the third of those statements was given only a few weeks ago at the request of the inquiry,
Yeah.
addressing a particular issue.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Cassidy, I want to take you back then to, as it were, the beginning of the narrative, and back to 2010 or thereabouts. And I think it's right to say that at that time you were living with your wife and children in Salisbury.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
I think, is it right to say that you had 3 children? Were they all living with you at that time, or maybe not?
No, only 2 of them. 2 of my stepsons.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if we could have on the screen, please, INQ 005819, page 33. Mr. Cassidy, we've looked at maps like this a number of times in the inquiry. You'll appreciate that Christie Miller Road is where Sergei Skripal was living in 2018. I think we've heard that, remember, we're still talking about 2010. In those days, you were living in Devizes Road,
Yeah.
which we can see on the map. It's the one that goes off from the roundabout, pointing towards sort of 11 o'clock. Is that the Devizes Road that you were living on?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Do we actually see on this map where you were living, or
No,
or
we
not?
don't. I live slightly further up to 11 o'clock,
Right.
about a third of the way from the roundabout.
All right. So, what would that be, about maybe a mile from the roundabout, something like that?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Thank you. We can take that down. So, still just sticking with 2010, Mr. Casti, is it right that at the time you were working as a haulage contractor?
Yes, I was.
And had you previously worked in the Royal Navy?
Yes, I was in the Royal Navy since I left school.
Right. So that was you living there at that time, Mr. Casti, and we see from your witness statements that sometime around 2010, Sergei Skripal and his family moved in next door to you
Yes.
on Devizes Road.
Yeah.
And is it right that the family that moved in comprised Sergei, his wife Ludmila, and their two children, a
Yes.
son called Sasha
Yes.
and
Yes,
a
it
daughter
was,
called
yeah.
Yulia? And did you get to know them?
Well, it's a rented property next door to us, and obviously it changes tenants sort of semi-frequently. And I noticed that we'd had a new family move in, and I commented to my wife that they're out drinking there on the balcony, and I went down the garden to pretend to tend to my fish pond, and Sergei saw me and leaned over the fence and said hello, and we had a good old chat, and I think we invited him round for a drink shortly afterwards, and that opened the door of friendship.
Yeah. In your witness statements, you describe really becoming good friends with the family. You
Yes.
mentioned, for example, going and having barbecues at
Yes,
each
we
other's
did.
houses.
Yeah, we knew them for a long time. We exchanged barbecues. Sergei amused me in an ironic sort of way. People that amuse me always open the door of friendship to me, and our families knew each other. My friends became Sergei's friend in the end, and it was altogether a good situation.
One of the things that we see from your statement, Mr. Casti, is that you and Sergei liked drinking together
We did indeed.
and also talking. You say that Sergei talked a lot.
Oh, he certainly did. He had a good conversation.
And did that include talking about his time in Russia?
Yes, it did. Yeah, very interesting it was too.
Can we look, please, at a passage of your first witness statement? So that's INQ 005774. And if we can look, thank you, it's towards the bottom of the first page. And in fact, it's the passage I want to ask you about, Mr. Casti, is the very bottom of that page, and it goes over to the next page. Can we see three lines up from the bottom? It says, in the time I've known Sergei, he would sometimes tell us he was in the military, starting off in airborne troops and ending up that he was a diplomat. Is that right?
Yes.
And was there then another connection between you in the sense that you'd both been in the military?
Yes, there was, yeah.
And reading on, you say Sergei did say he could not go back to Russia, or there would be, and then in quotation marks, reprisals. Said he would not go into much detail about what this was all about, but did say he knew Russian leader Putin personally, and said Putin would, again in quotation marks, get him. Just pausing there, it would seem from the way in which that statement's written, and in particular the quotation marks, that those were things that you remembered quite clearly him saying back in 2018 when you gave the statement to the police.
Yeah, they're all from separate occasions. I mean, yes, he did talk about reprisals, but I remember it specifically when he said about Putin will get him. We had a gathering of us chaps on a Sunday, like we do, and he wasn't actually talking to me. I was stood behind him, and he was talking to my friends. And that's what he said. and I just so I knew for certain coming here, I was with the blokes that were there, and I said, he did say that, didn't he? And they confirmed it. Yes, he did.
Because just to be clear, we heard not last week, the week before last, we saw a statement that Mr. Skripal has put in saying he wasn't sure if he said those very words.
Well, no,
It sounds like you are sure, Mr. Cassidy.
absolutely.
All right. Let's just read on, if we can, straight on. You go on in the statement. Me and my wife did a bit of research on Sergei as a result of things he'd said by Googling his name and could see that he was involved in spying on Russia. We never told Sergei that we knew this information. Mr. Cassidy, I'd like just ask you to look at a document, please, if we could bring it up on screen. It's INQ 005781. Here we have, Mr. Cassidy, an article. It's a web article, but an article from the Guardian newspaper.
Yeah.
With a photograph of Sergei. Is that?
Yeah.
I'd just like to show you this article, and then I'm going to ask you if this was the sort of thing that you saw when you were Googling. We can see the headline: British Security Services debrief 2 Russians freed in spy swap. We see the date. It's July 2010, so around the time that Mr. Skripal came to Salisbury. And then we see immediately underneath the date, the first paragraph or two in the article. There's talk of a high-profile spy swap, and one of the names of the people who is coming to this country is given as Sergei Skripal. And then, if we can go down, please, 4 paragraphs up from the bottom, there's a paragraph which deals with Sergei Skripal in particular and refers to him as being a former Russian army colonel convicted of passing the identities of Russian agents working undercover in Europe to MI6. Refers to him being sentenced in August 2006 to 13 years in jail for spying for Britain. And then there's a reference to the Russian prosecution having said that he'd been paid $100,000 by MI6 for information which he'd been supplying since the 1990s. So there is an account in the Guardian newspaper, Mr. Cassidy. I'm sure you probably can't remember exactly what you saw when you were Googling, as you describe, but was this the type of information that you remember seeing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it, in fact, you that did the Googling, or was it your wife?
My wife did most of the Googling.
All right, but you discussed
Yeah,
with her.
yeah. She showed me afterwards, you know.
All right. Thank you. We can take that down now. So, and I should have asked, do you remember whether that Googling was something you did sort of in 2010, when around the time that Mr. Skripal moved in next door to you, or might it have been later?
I beg your
than that?
pardon? No, could you say that again?
Yes. I've just been asking you about the Googling.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You may not remember, Mr. Cassidy, but was it something that you think you may have done in 2010 when he moved in?
It was pretty soon after he moved in, yeah.
Yeah. So just moving forward in the chronology, Mr. Cassidy, we know, we've seen from your statement that after a couple of years or something like that, Mr. Skripal moved away from being your next door neighbour.
Yep.
Can you remember when that was, roughly?
Well, when you said about a couple of years later.
So 2012.
Yes, I'd say so.
And where did he move to?
Christie Miller Road.
Right. And I won't call the map back up, but we see that was not very far from where you were living, half a mile or so.
Yeah.
And did you and your family stay in touch with him?
Oh, yes, yeah.
And the friendship continued then?
Oh, it did indeed, yeah.
And we also know, Mr. Cassidy, that in that period and in the years that followed, Mr. Skripal suffered some personal sadness. First of all, his wife, Ludmilla, died of cancer.
Yeah.
And was her illness something that you knew about at the time?
Oh, yes, we
were
knew
involved
she
in?
was ill, and we knew when she passed away.
And was it fairly shortly after Ludmilla died that Mr. Skripal's daughter, Yulia, moved back to Russia?
I can't remember exactly the timescale, but not at a sort of very close time. I think she's rather sympathetic, but not long afterwards,
Yeah.
because I think she had plans for that anyway.
Right. And was it the case that then, that after moving back to Russia, Yulia would come and visit her father back and forth between Russia and the UK?
Yes, it was.
And then finally, and again, this is something you mentioned in your statement, Sergei's son, Alexander, or I think he was known as Sasha, he also died, in fact, in July 2017. Was that something you were aware of? Did you know he was unwell?
Oh, yes, we certainly knew he was unwell. He'd been round our house on one or two occasions, once again for the chap's Sunday lunchtime, and along he came, and he looked very poorly.
We don't need to all the detail, but I think it's right that he had cirrhosis of the liver.
Well, quite possibly, yeah.
And you mentioned in your statement, Mr. Cassidy, that you attended his funeral,
Yes.
Sasha's funeral.
Yeah.
So, as I say, that appears to have been in 2017. So if we just move forward in the chronology one more step to early 2018, Mr. Skripal by this stage is living on his own in Christy Miller Road.
Yes.
What was your relationship, what was the state of your friendship with him at that point?
Well, it hadn't really altered, apart from the fact that he found himself on his own and bereaved. We still saw him. He came to a New Year's Eve. We had big New Year's Eve parties at our house, or we did in those days. And that was the first time he'd been on his own. And he came up, and he was okay, but he went home early and didn't see the New Year in with us. It was a bit sad. Yes, it did alter his demeanour a little bit.
Very roughly speaking, how often were you in touch with him, either seeing him or on the phone?
It went in phases. It's like any friendship. You see a lot of people for a sort of span of time, and then you don't. And that was the same. No difference at all, really.
And you've mentioned the New Year's Eve party. You've
Yeah.
mentioned the having drinks with him and so on. Was it also the case that you would help him out on occasions?
Yes, I did. Sergei used to ring me up, and he had this tone in his voice that I always knew that he wanted something, or somebody else wanted him to do something that he didn't want to do. And yeah, we helped him out. Like my stepson was going to help do his shower, and we gave him advice on this and that. And of course, the trip to London to pick Yulia up.
Yes, well, and we'll come to that in a moment. And there's also reference in the statement to the Railway Club. Tell us something about that.
Well, the Railway Club's exactly as it is. It's a railway social club, which used to be solely for railway workers, but it's a club that we frequented, Mo and I, for 30-odd years. And of course, people outside the railway industry can use it. And what I wanted to do was, well, if I wasn't around and Sergei was at a bit of a loss, it'd give him somewhere to go with people that he knew, because, as I said previously, my friends became his friends, and it gave him the opportunity to do things without me.
So we've skipped over the bit. But did you ask him, is it a membership club? Or
Yes, it is. I got him the membership there, yeah.
So you got him membership. Is it actually close to the railway in Salisbury?
Oh, yeah, right next to it.
Because we've seen the maps, but then, again, we won't need to bring them up. But the railway is, as it were, between the area where you lived and Sergei lived and the centre of town.
It's the old Western line. It's the disused platform and station from the railway as it used to be. Now it's just South Western Railway, which uses the main station.
I see, thank you. And then, lastly, when you did contact Sergei in this time by telephone, did you tend to ring him on his mobile phone or on his landline, or both?
Well, Usually, I mean, I make most of my phone calls on my mobile, like people do these days. But I almost always used to ring Sergey on his landline. And he never used to answer them straight away. He used to screen his calls with the answering machine and almost always rang me back.
Right. And I suppose you wouldn't have necessarily known whether when he called you he was using his landline or mobile, but did he ring you then? Does it follow from what you said on your mobile? When
Yeah,
he
he
rang?
used to do both. If he couldn't get hold of me on the landline, he'd ring me on the mobile.
I see. Okay, thank you. Let's turn then, Mr. Cassidy. You've mentioned it once or twice already, to the day or so before Mr. Skripal was poisoned, and in particular the trip to Heathrow Airport. Now we've heard in that week or so, early March 2018, there was heavy snow.
Yeah.
And as we'll see, you had a 4x4 truck. Was that something that you were able to put to good use in that time?
Well, it certainly was. I mean, I advise anybody not to buy one unless they want to be pestered by everybody during the snow. But yes, I did. I had a very busy day that day, pulling people out of the snow in the vehicles, running people to hospital, and then I had Sturgess to run up to Heathrow Airport. So yeah, it was a busy day, and I was pretty tired by the end of it.
Well, let's just take the days in turn, if we may, and let's go to your first statement, please. Yeah. And it's the second page. That's it. So we'll look at the paragraph. Do you see the paragraph starting on Thursday the 1st or Friday the 2nd, Mr. Cassidy?
Yeah.
So what you say there is on Thursday the 1st or Friday the 2nd of March 2018, you received a phone call from Sergey. You say, I believe on my home phone, as I don't have any record of it on my mobile. Just pausing there, the police have obviously investigated these matters, and the position seems to have been that Sergey rang you on the Friday.
Yeah.
In fact, it was on your mobile phone
Yeah.
that he rang you. If that's what the police have found,
If that's what the
you wouldn't
police say,
dispute
then
it,
it's
I take
right,
it.
then, isn't it?
All right. But just picking up your statement then, you say he, that is Sergey, asked if I could help him out by picking up his daughter, Yulia, from Heathrow Airport. You say you didn't think there was anything out of the ordinary in this. The weather was bad at that time with the snows hitting. He, that is Sergey, said there were no trains, no taxis due to the weather, so needed you to help him out. And reading on, you say, I said it wouldn't be a problem. He asked me to meet me on India Avenue, Salisbury, on Saturday, the 3rd of March, at about 1 o'clock. And finally, you say you knew Yulia was visiting the UK as Sergey had visited it just before Christmas and told us she would be going to visit the UK for a 2-week period.
Yeah.
So, as I said, it looks as though that call from Sergey asking you to take him, or at least to pick Yulia up, was a call made in the late afternoon on Friday. Was that the day you say that you'd been pulling everyone out of snowdrifts and taking them to hospital, or maybe you can't remember at this distance?
No, it was both, I think. It was a busy time. The Saturday morning, we were clearing snow up and stuff. I can't remember, quite frankly, what day it was.
Sure. You say it wasn't out of the ordinary. Is that because it was the sort of request which Sergey you might have expected to receive from him?
Well, as I said, Sergey used to come to me often with something he wanted me to do, and I was always happy to do so. He was on his own, and yeah, it wasn't a problem.
Had you actually driven him to Heathrow or done similar trips before?
No, I hadn't. No, because of course he usually drove himself there because the weather wasn't bad.
This was really about the snow. It wasn't that he
it
couldn't.
was unprecedented at the time. Yeah.
We've seen a picture of his BMW car,
Yeah.
and was that the point? He didn't feel that car was up to driving
I
in the
mean,
snow.
at the time, Christopher Road would have been completely snowed in. Although it did clear up a bit on a Saturday, but we didn't alter our arrangements.
Yeah. Again, I think just filling in some of the narrative, it looks as though, and I think this is something your wife mentions in one of her statements, initially the arrangement was to leave a bit later than 1 o'clock.
It was.
And there was a call from Sergei on the Saturday morning saying, actually, I got the timings of the plane wrong, or it's arriving early, so can we leave a bit earlier?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yes, that's right. Initially, it was going to be an arrival at 3 o'clock,
Yeah.
and I think he got it wrong because it was actually 1300 hours,
I see.
which is 1 o'clock. So I think that's where that went a bit awry.
And the journey, leaving aside the snow, but the journey from Salisbury to Heathrow is, roughly speaking, how long
Well,
does it take?
it's on a main trunk route, so it was completely uneventful with the weather.
So there were the arrangements. Let's move on and look at the day in question. So the next day, the Saturday, might that have been, as you say, another one of those days where you were doing other things apart from taking Sergei to Heathrow Airport?
Yes, it was, yeah.
And amongst other things, as I say, you received a call from Sergei that morning saying, bring it forward from 3 to 1. And did you discuss this trip to Heathrow with your wife? And was there a plan made that she would come along with you too?
The day was very busy, and I think she could see I was getting a bit fed up and tired. So she said, "Would you like me to come with you for company?" And I said, "Yeah, great," and that's what happened.
And I think again we see from your wife's statement that immediately before you collected Sergei on the way to Heathrow, you went and collected your daughter from
down at the supermarket.
Yeah, and took her home.
Yeah.
And it was after that you went on to pick up Sergei.
No, I don't. There was other stuff involved.
All right.
Between that, other work I had assigned to me.
Okay.
And I can't quite remember what it was.
But other you had a list of things to do.
No, I certainly did. Yeah.
Maybe, Mr. Cassidy. Let's look, if we can, though, at a photograph. It's INQ 00581948. And if we could look, please, at the photograph at the top on the left.
Yeah.
And if we could zoom in on that. And this is a CCTV camera on India Avenue, Mr. Cassidy. And is that your sort of truck, the grey truck that we see driving along there? And in fact, the timing, we can see the timing on the screen itself says 14:24, but that's not right.
No, it's an hour and a half out.
The clock inside the camera, the police established, was wrong. It's I think about an hour and 20 minutes fast. So actually, that photograph would have been taken just about 1 o'clock or 2 minutes past 1.
Yeah.
Does that timing fit with what you remember of the day?
Yes.
And what do we see there? Is you're driving along India Avenue. Would that be you driving towards or away from Christie Mill Road?
That's driving towards Devizes Road, I should think. There's a slight incline there.
So would that be, we imagine, after you've picked up Sergei Skripal?
Do you know, I can't see.
It's hard to see inside the car, but perhaps it doesn't matter.
I don't know.
In any event,
It's on India Avenue.
it's on India Avenue, and if
And
it
the
was
distance I would have travelled is literally from here to the end of the room. So
and if it's at 1 o'clock, then you would either have been just going to pick Sergei up, or you just coming back from picking him up.
Yeah.
We can see. We can see two things. We can see that there's still plenty of snow on the ground, but also on the road, slush. You mentioned earlier, were the conditions actually better for driving on the Saturday than they had been on the Friday?
Oh, certainly were, yeah.
Was it therefore actually necessary, do you think, for you to take Sergei to the airport or not?
Probably not, but the arrangements had been made, and I didn't want to make an issue of the fact that, well, why don't you go on your own? You know, it just didn't seem very charitable.
And do you remember where you actually picked Sergei up? Did you actually drive to his house at the bottom of Christie Miller Road or not?
No, we didn't drive to his house. We said we were on our way, And we went down India Avenue, of which goes into Christy Miller, and we turned in there expecting to go down to the house, but we didn't. Sergey was already walking up the road, putting his coat on.
Right.
So we just spun round at the top of the road and came out.
He jumped in. And did he sit in the front passenger seat next to you, or was your wife
No, he
sitting there?
wasn't. No, he sat in the back.
Right. Thank you. We can take that down. And Mr. Cassie, did you then drive straight to Heathrow Airport?
No, he didn't. We made good time going up, and I decided that we didn't want to pay sort of short-term car parking, which is expensive. And I knew of a little area by Colnbrook where I could sort of park and work out where the flight was, because my wife was watching it on flight radar. And when it got to the time that the plane was due to arrive, we were going to then go into the airport and park up in the short stay.
Yes.
We actually saw the aeroplane fly over us.
Right. Let's come on to that in a moment, but at least from where we see that photograph, you didn't stop in Salisbury, you drove up.
No, we drove up right by Heathrow Airport, yeah.
All right.
Colnbrook.
And can you remember anything about the journey? In your statement you say Sergey spoke for most of the way. Was that typical?
Yeah, he seemed his normal self.
One of the things perhaps that he mentioned on that journey was his shower was broken.
He beg your pardon?
His shower was broken.
Oh
and
yes,
he fixed
yes.
it.
Well, no, this was spoke beforehand. I think he'd mentioned it before, but then it was discussed on that trip up because he couldn't get anybody to fix it.
Right. And was this something we'll come to see in a few minutes? But was this then something that you thought that you or your stepson would?
Yeah,
be able to
his
help?
stepson, he's handy, so he was the kiddie.
All right. Well, we'll come back to that. So, Mr. Casty, you drove up to Colnbrook, possibly even saw the aircraft itself coming into land. But did there come a time when you then drove into the airport and dropped Sergey off at the terminal?
Well, when we established that Yulia was actually in the arrivals hall, we thought because it was about a 10-minute journey from where we were to Terminal 4, we decided that was the time to move. And that's exactly what we did.
And you went to the sort of drop-off area.
Well, Sergey told us we could actually stop in the drop-off area, but when we got there, we realised we'd got to pay for that. So we sort of about turned and went straight into the car park where we bought a short stay ticket.
Yes. So you ended up paying for a car park in the end anyway.
Yeah.
But this may not matter much, but did all three of you do that and then walk into the airport, or did you drop Sergey off and then you and
No, we
your
dropped
wife?
Sergey off, and I was issued the entry ticket at the barrier.
Yes. Now, one of the things that you mentioned in your statement in passing is that at the time Sergey got out, presumably to say so that you could stay in touch with him, you or your wife put your phone number into his mobile phone. Perhaps we can have a look at that. It's in your statement again, so it's INQ 005774, it's page 2. Thank you. And if we could go to right towards the bottom, about 6 lines up from the bottom. Yes. Can you see, Mr. Cassie?
Yep.
There's a sentence that starts, Sergey told us that he had a new phone. Can you see that? I think it might be 7 lines up. No, 6. Sergey told us that he had a new phone before he went into the terminal. If we needed to get hold of him, if we were separated, he gave Maureen, I think that's probably the phone, and we took his new phone number.
That's slightly inaccurate. It was established he'd got a new phone when we were sat at Colnbrook waiting to go move on to Terminal 4.
Right.
And that's when my wife noticed that he had a new phone and had very few numbers on it. And she said exactly what you just said, you know, put my number in. And she then rang my number, so he had two-way comms when he was in the
Yes.
terminal.
Can you actually remember the phone itself now, Mr.
Well, no,
Castell?
because I never dealt with it. My wife did.
All
But
right.
apparently, she told me it was one of the cheapy ones you get from Tesco's.
All right, so not a
No,
not a sort of smartphone
not a,
type
not a,
thing.
not an up-to-date thing.
No.
Women
Do you,
have.
you may, from what you've said, you may not be able to help us with this, but can you even say whether it was a new phone, as in brand new, or just new to him, or do you not know?
No, well, it was new to him, and apparently it was brand new because he couldn't charge his old one.
Right.
I think that was the story.
Right. All right. But an old style phone.
Yeah.
I see. Thank you. So that then took place back in Colnbrook, but you've told us that you then drove to the airport, dropped Sergei off, you and Maureen parked.
Yeah.
What happened next?
Well, we went in to find. We walked into the arrivals area, and found Sergei stood by the barrier where they all come out from the customs, and we joined him for a bit, but it was very, very busy, and I was getting a bit tired, so I just walked off and sat down at the coffee shop while they waited.
And during this time, I think you've already mentioned that possibly while you were still in Colnbrook, you knew that Yulia was in the baggage hall.
Yeah.
Was Sergei in touch with Yulia at this time? Do you remember?
Intermittently, because there wasn't a good signal there, but she told us when she got a bag, but then a phone call later said that she was actually in the immigration control.
Right.
But there were 3 flights in, international flights in, and there was only 2 immigration control areas open, so
Right.
it was a long old haul.
Long queue. And you say she told us. Was that by texting or phoning Sergei?
She spoke to Sergei on his phone. She didn't text.
Right. But there came a time, sometime later, long queue, you'd gone to sit down, but there did come a time when Yulia came out through customs
Yeah.
and met Sergei. And Maureen, was Maureen still standing with Sergei at the time?
she was. Yeah.
And after that, did you, as a group, sort of stay and have a cup of coffee, or did you
No,
leave straight away?
we wanted to hot foot home. It had been a long day.
All right. There's some footage. We've got various CCTV compilations, Mr. Casti, and I think we have some footage which I think shows that moment and then the next minute or so. Perhaps we could look, please. It's INQ 006034, and if we could play it from 2 minutes 20, please. This should start, Mr. Casti, with Yulia coming out through customs.
How's the time on this one, Mr. O'Connor?
Well,
Right, is it?
I believe it is correct, sir. Yes.
At 16:38, Yulia Skripal left the airport, walking next to Ross Cassidy, followed by Sergei Skripal.
Just pause it there, please. It's your back, Mr. Casti, but do you believe that's you walking with Yulia and Sergei?
I beg your pardon?
It's your back in the photograph.
Oh,
in the
that's
film.
yes, it is.
That's you. Thank you. Can we play on?
They joined Maureen Cassidy at the ticket machine. The group then drove to Christine Miller Road in Ross Cassidy's vehicle.
Just pause there, please. Thank you. So is that actually your wife paying for the parking ticket, Mr.
Yeah.
Casti? And then you and Sergei and Yulia, we see you in shot on the right-hand side there.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not sure if there is any more to play on to 3:22, please. Yes. Thank you. So you went together to the car park, ticket, and then back to your car.
Yep.
And I think if we could now go to INQ 005819, page 48. And if we can look at the top right-hand picture, please. It's just to pick up the timings, Mr. Cassidy. I think on that video it was 4:38 that we saw you leaving the terminal and walking towards the car park. Is that another picture of your car?
Yeah.
And that would appear to be you leaving the terminal for car park 5 or 7 minutes later at 16:45. With those timings seem about right, and is that your car, Mr. Cassidy?
It is my car. I'm not
Yes.
sure about the timing.
All right. Why not? 5 minutes or so to walk from the terminal, pay for the ticket, and then leave?
Yeah, I'd say so. We arrived back to... Yeah, that'd be right. About an hour and a half back to Sturgess.
Yes. OK, thank you. We can take that photograph down. Yes, that was going to be my next question, Mr. Cassidy. Is it, roughly speaking, the journey from Heathrow back to Salisbury is roughly speaking how long?
Yeah, about 90 minutes.
Right. And on that journey, who sat where in the car?
The Scripples sat in the back, and Mo sat in the passenger seat, and I was driving.
Yes. Thank you. I want to ask you about a memory from the journey that you shared with the police and included in your witness statement. If we can look, please, at your first witness statement, so that's INQ 005774, and we need to go to page 3 for this. So, Mr. Cassidy, the route back from Heathrow would have taken you a short distance on the M25, then
M3.
then the M3, and then you merge onto the A303
That's right.
to take you down to Salisbury. And the incident you're describing was during the M3 phase of that journey.
Yes, it was.
Let's pick it up, please, 4 lines down. You say in the statement, whilst travelling back, we passed what I believe to be a plain police car on the M3 between Hook and Basingstoke. It was a plain white BMW estate. I thought it was a police car as I could see their LED sign in the rear window for indicating cars to pull over. And Maureen said she could see a police force crest on the dashboard as we went by. Also, whilst travelling between Fleet and Basingstoke on the M3, there was a black BMW saloon car that was keeping pace with us for a really long distance, either travelling behind us or in front. This just stands out to mind, so I thought I should mention it. So just pausing there, you're describing 2 different cars that you remember on that section of the journey, the M3 section. How clear were you in your memory of those cars a week or so later when you gave this statement?
Very. It was an unusual incident, and because of what happened the following day, I put 2 and 2 together and came up with some conclusion that we were probably being followed.
In your second statement, which you gave a few days later, you were asked how long the black car had been keeping up with you, and you said about 10 minutes. Would that be about right?
Possibly, that was what I noticed. I remarked to, we saw the traffic car. It was a plain traffic BMW estate. And I was speeding because I wanted to get home. And all of a sudden I noticed on the near side lane that it was obviously a police patrol vehicle, because as you said, you see the LED in the back. And I slowed down as we crept past him. She could see on the dash where the sat-nav uses the police crest, and it was obviously police officers inside.
Can I just pause there for a moment? So was this something that you and your wife were aware of at the time? It wasn't thinking back several days later?
No, it
you were aware
wasn't.
at the time?
No, because when I said about the police car, I said also, I think there's another police car behind us, working in tandem with that other one. You know, they might have been out on a patrol for speeders, which I was, and I said, there's something odd about the vehicle behind us. 1 minute it was in front of us, 1 minute it was behind us, and it stuck out of my mind, and I mentioned it at that time.
Yeah. You mentioned it on the journey back.
On the journey back, yeah.
And then, of course, several days later, when the police asked you, presumably if there was anything notable about the journey, you were able to tell them what we see in the statement.
Yeah, it was clear in my mind.
You said a moment ago, Mr. Cassidy, that the sort of normal journey time was about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Was there anything special about that journey in the sense of it taking you longer or shorter than you would have expected?
Well, no, not at all, no.
And if we can go back to the photographs, please, INQ 00581948. If we could look at that photograph on the right-hand side, please. Mr. Cassidy, you'll remember that CCTV camera on India Avenue with the timings that are an hour and 20 minutes fast. So that would suggest, if we aim off for the timing, that you got back. I mean, first of all, perhaps I should ask you, does that show, do you think, your truck arriving back in India Avenue?
It certainly does, but the timers are once again out, aren't they?
Yes, but if you left the airport at 4:45...
That would have put us there about then, but it had been 1828, not 1928.
Well, it's not quite that. If we correct for the timing,
Yeah.
It's about 6 minutes past 6.
Yeah.
So that would mean that you'd done it in just a bit less than an hour and a half.
As I said, I was speaking.
Yes. Well, I wasn't going to mention that, Mr. Cassidy, but since you have, you did slightly better than you were expecting.
Yeah.
But the times are roughly right.
Yeah.
And we can have the same conversations we had earlier. Do you think that shows you driving down towards Christie Miller Road
Yes,
on
it
India
does.
Avenue? And you said that at the beginning of the day, you hadn't actually driven up to Sergei's house. You'd met him and you
Yeah.
jumped in. When you got back, did you in fact go all the way down to
Yes,
his
we
house?
did.
And you parked outside?
Well, as previously mentioned, my stepson was going to mend the shower on the Sunday, and I was originally going to go in and see what was required and let him know in a phone call before he went down so he could go and buy any of the stuff that he needed and go straight round to Sergei's house. But as I said, it had been a long day, and I was having a bit of a sense of humour failure by then, and my wife could see that, and she said, look, back into the drive, we'll take the bag out the back, and I'll go up and take some photographs, which is what happened.
Right. And what I'd like to do, Mr. Cassidy, is go to a couple of sections of police statements that your wife, Maureen, gave, just to cover that incident. So if we can start, please, with INQ 005283. And just sticking on the first page for a moment, we can see that this was a statement that Maureen Cassidy, your wife, gave to the police on the 10th of March 2018. So again, within a few days or a week or so of the poisoning. And then if we can go on, please, to page 10. Yes, and starting at the very bottom, the last two lines, I'm going to read a section of your wife's statement, Mr. Cassidy. And when we finish, I'll ask you if that more or less accords with your memory of those events. So Mrs. Cassidy says, I know that we got to Sergei's house around or just after 6, just pausing there, that is consistent with the timings we've just been discussing, because I've checked my son's Russell's CCTV footage after we became aware of what had happened. And then moving on, once we were on Christie Miller Road, Ross turned the car around and parked in front of their house. I got out and went towards the back in order to take out Julia's suitcase, which was a 40 centimetre wide, 55 centimetre height. It was a small cabin suitcase, light grey in colour. It was a soft case with a diamond pattern of silver thread. There were 2 zips for the main part of the suitcase and 1 for the expandable front, which was puffy. That made me think it wasn't full. Sergei took the suitcase off me as I was just taking it out of the pickup part of the car. Sergei then opened the front door to the house, and the black Persian-type cat was stood in the hallway. So Sergei greeted the cat, walks in first to the house, and then Yulia behind him. And she stood by the front door inside the hallway. And so I walked past Yulia, who was busy with the cat. Sergei walked upstairs to the bathroom. I followed after. I may have touched the banister railing as I walked up the stairs. At the top of the stairs, I went into the bathroom, and opposite the door is the bathtub with the shower over the top. Sergei told me that there was no pressure in the tap, and he'd bought the replacement, which was still in the box and was opposite the bathtub. It was like for like, but a different model. I took a picture of the shower on my phone and also of the replacement part. I then walked down the stairs, back out of the front door, where I said goodbye to both of them by the front door. I was probably only in the house for a few minutes. She then describes, as we can see, getting back into the car and you going together to Amesbury. And she said that she texted her son Russell, asking him if he would sort out Sergei's shower. He replied saying it wouldn't be a problem. And then she describes the 2 of you returning home. And then finally, let's just notice that she mentions the next day, Sunday the 4th, at around 11 a.m., Ross rang Sergei and told him that I could sort out the shower and asked when it would be convenient. Sergei said that he would be out between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. Otherwise, any other time would be fine. So that's your wife, Maureen's, description of those events. We'll come on to the next day in a minute, but as far as the end of the day on Saturday and Maureen going into the house and checking the shower, taking photos and so on, is that, broadly speaking, how you remember it?
Yes, I mean, as I said, it mentions on there we went for supper afterwards, but yeah, that's fine.
And just sticking on that, theme, your wife was asked some further questions about exactly what she touched on her way in and out of the Sergei Skripal's house on Christy Miller Road. And if we can just go on, please, to another of the statements she gave, in fact, quite recently. This is INQ 005998. And she gives some detail here about what she did. I'll read out, in fact, the whole statement. She said, paragraph 1, she says she's been asked by the inquiry to address some questions put forward by the Sturgess family legal team. Paragraph 2, she refers to a police statement that she gave, saying that when she was leaving the Skripal's house at 47 Christy Miller Road on Saturday, the 3rd of March 2018, she said, I pushed the outer door closed with the outer door handle, and she records she's been asked if she remembers how I touched the outer door handle and whether I held the handle with my hand. And what she says then is this: the inside front door opened inwards into the house, the outside door opened outwards towards the front garden. Just pausing there, is that your memory of that house as well,
Yes.
Mr. Cassidy?
Yes, it is.
So there must be a little porch or something
Yes,
between the
it
two
is.
doors, is there?
Few feet into the house, yeah.
And what your wife goes on to say then is, when I was leaving, both doors were open. And she says, I shut the outer door only by pushing it closed. I cannot remember if I touched the handle. Normally, it would have been Sergei closing the door, not me. But if I was closing the door, then I would have pushed the outer door shut using the handle. You were in the car at this time, so presumably you can't really help us with exactly what she touched that night. In any event, she was in there for a fairly short period of time, came out again, rejoined you in the car.
Yeah.
Did she sit back in the front passenger seat?
Yes, she
as
did.
she had before? And we saw her mention the fact that you then, the two of you, went off to Amesbury and had dinner in a pub.
Yeah.
That was the end of the day on the Saturday then. And the next day, the Sunday, we saw a reference in your wife's statement to a call, and that's something that you mentioned as well. If we can have your second witness statement, please, INQ 005267, page 4. And if we could zoom in, it's further down the page. That's it. You say on the Sunday morning between 10 and 11, you made a call from your mobile to Sergei's landline. You give the number. And just pausing there, we saw a reference, I think, to the same call in your wife's statement, and she said that the purpose of that call was for you to talk to Sergei about fixing the shower.
Yes, it was.
And then you go on in your statement to say, in light, you've had time to think about it in light of recent events. I do recall that Sergei appeared to be surprised to hear from me, as if he was expecting someone else. He recovered quickly, and then he was talking to me as he would normally. In addition to this, when I do call Sergei, I've rarely known him to answer the phone. He screens his calls using answer phone. He would normally call me back instead of answering the phone. I don't leave messages on his phone. So do we take it then that this was that on this occasion he did pick up the phone straight away rather than screening?
Well, I can't remember now, but
No.
it would appear so if I...
That's the point you're making in the witness
Yeah,
statement.
yeah.
Can you expand at all on what is in that witness statement about, were you surprised at the time, or was it only in retrospect? Was it completely out of the ordinary or just a bit unusual?
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? And of course with the event of what happened afterwards, yes, perhaps it was, but I can't really remember.
No. Lastly, I think this is actually in your earlier statement, but tell us if you remember. Also in that conversation, you suggested that Sergei might want to come to the railway club that afternoon.
Yes, we did.
And you said that you would be there until about 3:30.
Yeah.
Did he in fact come that day?
No, didn't turn up.
Mr. Cassidy, thank you very much. Those are all the questions I have, and so there are no Rule 10 questions for Mr. Cassidy. Sorry, could you just give me
Yes.
So there's a point of detail that Mr. Straw wants to take up with Mr. Cassidy about the timing of a phone call. Mr. Straw will address you as to whether he may ask that question, but I can indicate from what I've seen, I would have no objection
I should
to
think
asking
so,
that
Mr.
question.
Straw. Yes, you ask it.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Cassidy, I ask questions on behalf of the family and the partner of Dawn Sturgess. And just one point of detail. You mentioned to Mr. O'Connor that on Friday night you spoke to Sergei Skripal by phone to arrange the time that you'd meet up on Saturday.
Yeah,
And then you spoke again on Saturday about the time.
yeah.
Can you remember on Friday what time you said you would meet up with Sergei?
Well, we said originally, he said the flight was, I can't remember what it was, but we arranged originally to pick him up at 3 o'clock. But he then realised that the flight was a different time than what he thought it was. So that was rearranged till 1 o'clock.
Could we have on screen, please, INQ 005267?
Sorry, this is your number again.
Sorry, 5267.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And page 3 of that, please. Mr. Cassidy, this is your statement of the 9th of March 2018. And could you have a look, please, at the third paragraph? So, I then called him on Friday evening and arranged to pick him up from his address at about 13:30 hours. And then on the Saturday, having discovered that the flight was due earlier, I made a final call to rearrange to pick him up for 1 p.m. Does that sound accurate?
That sounds right, yeah.
So it's gone from 1:30 to 1
Yeah.
o'clock. Does
Yeah.
that sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So may I have permission to ask where Maureen Cassidy sat in the car when they went to Amesbury?
Yes,
Thank
of
you.
course, if it matters.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cassidy, then going on to Saturday, so the 3rd of March, and in the evening when you and your wife travelled to Amesbury and back after having dropped Mr. Skripal off, you mentioned that Mrs. Cassidy sat in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
Do you remember what she touched or what she would have touched?
No, not really.
Would she have put the seatbelt on?
Oh, yeah, I should have put a seatbelt on, certainly, yeah.
This is going to Heathrow or going to the pub in the evening?
I'm sorry, going to the pub in the evening. So going to
After she's been into the house, in other words.
precisely, yes,
Got it.
yes. So on the way to Amesbury and back after leaving the Skripal house, and presumably she would have touched the door handles and so on, getting in and out.
Yeah, of course you would, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Those were all the questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Troy. Just let me not jot that down, Mr. Cassidy, but basically I think we've probably finished. Just a second. Is there anything else, Mr. O'Connor?
So there's not. We finished with Mr. Cassidy.
Well, Mr. Cassidy, thank you very much for coming. It's a great help. I don't think we need to keep you unless you want to stay. No? Well, that's entirely up to you. Entirely understandable. Is it a convenient time for us to break, Mr. O'Connor?
Yes, it is,
perhaps?
sir.
Then let's say 20 past 11 by that clock up there.
All rise.
Yes, Ms. White.
Morning, sir. Good morning, Commander Murphy. As you know, my name's Francesca Whitelaw, and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Just first of all, to remind anyone coming fresh to the proceedings that you've already been sworn when you gave your evidence in two parts to the inquiry in Salisbury the week before last.
That's correct.
Thank you very much again for attending today to give evidence. This tranche of your evidence will address the movements of Sergei and Yulia Skripal on the 3rd and 4th of March 2018. You should have in front of you a copy of your witness statement dated the 2nd of October 2024. The transcript, the reference is INQ 006056,
That's correct.
which, as I say, you've already confirmed and used your earlier oral evidence. You should also have in front of you a copy of the Babasco police report, INQ 005820,
Yes, I do.
and the accompanying graphics pack, INQ 005819.
Correct.
By way of introduction, then, we remind ourselves you're currently the Metropolitan Police Service Commander leading SO15, the London Counter-Terrorism Command at New Scotland Yard, is that right?
Yes, I am. That's correct.
And you lead the ongoing National Security Police investigation into the suspects.
I do.
And in 2018, you were the Detective Superintendent closely involved with Operation Wadana, the investigation into the Skripal poisoning.
I was. That's correct.
And that investigation was established on the 5th of March 2018.
It was.
And also, just to remind ourselves of what I dealt with previously with you in relation to documents, the witness statement that you've made for the inquiry, in your words at paragraph 13, is intended to cover, so far as possible, in an open document, my own involvement in the investigation, but also the investigation as a whole. So, as such, is it right you've drawn on the contemporaneous documents of others, such as policy logs, decision logs, notebooks?
I have. That's correct.
And is it also right that some of your evidence may be open gists of closed documents?
That is correct.
And is the purpose of that to put into the public domain as much information as possible without endangering national security?
It is. That's its purpose, yes.
So is it right, therefore, there may be instances where you're not able to answer a question in open, or you may need time to make inquiries to confirm how much information can be given?
Yes, that's correct.
With that introduction, then, if I may begin with just a limited background to the Skripals before we move on to their movements. And I should say, I'm going to address this with you now in a limited way, but there may be other evidence to come later in the inquiry.
Okay.
So could we go, please, to the Babasco report, INQ 005820, page 7, paragraph 13.
Yes.
Could we make paragraph 13 a bit larger, please? Thank you. So it says there, CTP did not have any involvement with or knowledge of Sergei Skripal or his family prior to the 4th of March 2018, when his poisoning took place.
Yes.
Operation Babasco holds information which indicates that when the Skripals' identities were first discovered on the 4th of March 2018, Wiltshire police systems did not contain any information about them.
Yes,
And-
that was correct.
sorry.
I'm sorry.
And that footnote 7 that we see there, is that a reference to a witness statement of a Detective Inspector Ben Mant of Wiltshire Police, from whom we expect to hear later in the inquiry?
Yes.
For now, I will read out the reference, and that is from his witness statement. Detective Sergeant Bailey confirmed to me that checks had been carried out on Wiltshire Police's niche management system, niche RMS, but there was no trace of either Sergei, Yulia, or the home address. Niche RMS is a computer software package that has been used by Wiltshire Police since 2006. It is intended to be the single version of the truth and links people, places, vehicles, and objects. It manages all crime reports, incident reports, and intelligence that are recorded by Wiltshire Police. Inquiries on PNC and PND also came back as no trace. Now, we're going to address Wiltshire Police systems with forthcoming Wiltshire witnesses, but if I could ask you just a few questions about counter-terrorism police knowledge, please. When counter-terrorism police took over the investigation from Wiltshire Police on the 5th of March 2018, were you aware that Wiltshire Police had carried out these checks of the niche management system and there was no trace on those systems of Sergei Yulia or the home address.
Yes, well, I personally wasn't aware. I think the investigation was aware that checks had been done by Wiltshire Constabulary, which would be quite normal in a case like this, and that they found no record on their niche system. I'm not familiar with niche personally, but I know it's the system that on which Wiltshire contain all of the information as you just described.
If we go to your witness statement, INQ 006056 at paragraph 35, could you explain how you add to paragraph 13 of the Vasco report, please?
Yes, thank you. So at the time, in 2018, the counter-terrorism network had already been created, but different parts of the country were at different stages of their embedding of that network and how different units and forces responded within the CT policing network. What I know to be the case is that on one of those systems, it's now called something entirely different, and I think we're on our third generation of different national security systems at that time. But in 2018, there was a record, actually, of the Skripal family. Specifically, his son had been stopped at Heathrow Airport back in 2011. It was just a contact with an officer, so a discussion at the airport, and a record had been made of that, and that was held within national counter-terrorism policing systems.
So to break that down, on the 5th of March, the investigation knew Wiltshire Police had no record of Sergei Yulia or the home address on the niche system. But was Operation Wadana aware of the 2011 engagement of SO15 with Alexander Skripal on the 5th of March 2018?
Yes, that was held on systems, and that would have been known clearly to all of counter-terrorism policing at the time.
So we've heard in previous evidence about the Southwest Counter-Terrorism Intelligence Unit. Was that part of the CTP network in 2018?
Yes, it was.
And are you able to say whether they held any information about Sergei or Yulia Skripal or the home address in 2018?
So Southwest CTIU, which was the Counter-Terrorism Intelligence Unit at the time, would have held the same record dating back to 2011 relating to the contact with Alexander Skripal at the airport. That was held on their system, but otherwise that would have been the same as and accessible to any CT unit in the country within the system that existed at the time.
So as far as counter-terrorism police were concerned, the only information held by CTP on the 5th of March 2018 was what you've outlined in paragraph 35 of your witness statement.
Yes, that's correct.
You go on to say in your witness statement, if we could move to paragraph 36, please. In any investigation, building a victim profile can inform the investigation's understanding of the context for a crime and help to generate new leads, lines of investigation. Within a day of the attack, CTPSE was able to pull together material in respect of Sergei Skripal from a variety of sources, including police computer systems. Could you just explain that for us, please?
Yes, absolutely. So it's very important at the start of an investigation to build a victimology. So try to understand as much as possible about our victim or victims and see if that information can help us reveal any information that might support the investigation and give us a new lead or a direction of the inquiry. In this case, at very early stages of the investigation, colleagues in the CT Policing in South East, who were initially leading this investigation, began the process of researching Sergei and Yulia and building up as much of a profile as possible. And you see there a variety of sources that would have, of course, included any open source checks, so anything that might be on the internet. It would, of course, included anything that we could find out that recorded their home addresses, their communication systems, any information that was held on any system that the police could have access to would be used to build that profile. So, when it says police computer systems, what we're really referring to there is the note I've just explained to you of the 2011 check. As you heard, there was nothing on the NICE system from Wiltshire. And of course, things like the police national computer. So Sergei had a car registered, so we needed to check that vehicle. So we would have used things like the police national computer to build that profile.
And you say in your witness statement at paragraph 51 that on the 5th of March, you say that the Operation Wadana senior investigating officer was made aware of the open source reporting that suggested Sergei Skripal was a former Russian intelligence service officer. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. As I've indicated, we may come back to some more issues of background. Moving briefly to Yulia Skripal's background, is it correct that Operation Wadana investigated this as well to build a victim profile, as you've described?
Yes, we did. We considered her to be a victim at that point.
And what did Operation Wadana conclude in terms of whether Yulia Skripal was a target of the attack?
Well, our conclusion was that she wasn't a target of the attack, or was certainly unlikely to be so, and in fact was an unfortunate victim caught in the collateral of this incident.
Thank you. And with that short background, I'm going to move now to the movements of the Skripals on, first of all, Saturday, the 3rd of March, 2018. Did CTP investigations discover that Yulia Skripal was living in Russia at the time of the attack?
Yes, that's correct.
And only in Salisbury on the 4th of March because she'd come to visit her father, Sergei?
That's correct.
Could we go to INQ 004673, page 3, and expand the paragraph beginning on Saturday, the 3rd of March, please? This is a draft witness statement of Yulia Skripal.
Right.
Expand the paragraph that says, thank you very much. So, on Saturday the 3rd of March 2018, I flew on an Aeroflot flight from Moscow, Sheremetyevo to London Heathrow. I was coming to England to visit my father. I was doing it then because my visa was about to expire. I had booked the flight, I think, at the end of January 2018 online at my work computer. I was due to return on the 18th of May. With reference to paragraph 43 of your witness statement, if you need to, could you just tell us about what counter-terrorism police inquiries revealed about Yulia's flight details?
Yes, so Yulia had flown, as she says in her statement, on flight SU2570 that day, from Moscow coming into Heathrow, landing on the 3rd of March. We managed to recover the ticket number for her flight and know that she used her Russian passport as a result of that flight. And we were able to identify the seat she sat in as a result of her booking, which was, in this case, 25C.
Thank you. We're going to look at some of those details now. If we could bring up, please, INQ 004634, page 1. Thank you. If we could make that larger so that we can see at the top. Can you confirm what this document is?
I believe this is the record of her flight details, including held by the airline, including her booking details and any information relating to her flight.
So do we see at the top there the name Skripal Yulia?
Yes, has a name, yes.
And where it says TKT time limit and T09 Feb, do you know if that's the date of booking or payment?
I believe that is the time of the booking, actually. If I recall from Yulia's statement, I think there was a slight delay in her annual leave at that time, so it was quite a late booking for this flight to the UK.
So above that, Mr. Murphy, with the number 2 at the front, is an SU number, which isn't quite the one that you gave. Is that the return flight, perhaps?
I believe that's the return flight, so,
Yeah.
and I believe 16th of March is the actual return flight. I appreciate her recollection might be slightly different, but I believe the 16th of March, from the booking at least, shows the date of return.
At least as originally booked. Or it's what's in the record. So
Yes.
that's right.
Could we just go to page 3 of that document, please? And about 9 lines down, if we can make that bigger. Does that look like the price paid and where it says tax
Yes.
as well?
And as you see above there, it's got the 3rd of March to the 16th of March as booking dates as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was what I was about to ask you. So do we see there the flight 2570 from, is SVO the abbreviation for the Moscow airport,
Yes.
and LHR London Heathrow, and is 1340 the time of the flight?
Yes, it is. Moscow time, I believe, at that moment in time.
I was going to ask you, is that Moscow time 2 hours ahead of London time? Do you know?
Yes, I believe it is, although this has been extraordinarily confusing to work out because at different times of the year, the time difference varies slightly. So, yes, I believe that's Moscow time.
And is the flight time about 4 hours?
Yes, that's correct.
So that would mean the flight should arrive around 3:40 in the afternoon of 3rd of March, London time.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Thank you. If we just go back to page 1 again, please. Underneath ticket time, there's a long number under the paragraph 2, 55521. Yeah. Is that the ticket number?
I believe that is the ticket number, yes.
That matches the number you've given in your witness statement.
It does.
And under SU Facts 1 SSR, do we then again have the abbreviations and the flight number 2570
Yes, and the dates.
and the dates? The 3rd of March, and as the chair has drawn attention to, there's a date the 16th of March. Now, we've seen just previously a draft statement where Julia indicated she was due to return on the 18th of May. Are you able to help us with that slight discrepancy?
And I'm afraid I'm not, beyond the fact that the best we can tell from the booking, the flight was booked for return on the 16th of March. However, Julia may have different recollection at the time of what her return plans were.
We heard evidence this morning that it was understood she was going to make a 2-week trip.
Yes, that was my understanding as well. So the 16th of March would be roughly the right time period for that booking.
And beneath the item 3 SSR docs, were those Julia's passport details?
I believe they are, yes. Do you feel on her Russian passport?
Yes, I think the RU may stand for Russian.
Yes.
And is 1984 the date of birth? Oh, actually, sorry, that may not be there. If we could actually go to page 4. At the top, you mentioned she was allocated seat 25C. Do we see that on this document? At the top there, if we could expand the very top lines.
Yes.
Seat.
Yes, I believe on the line that's marked as with a number 1 at the start of it, it has the flight number, the date, I believe the departure location and the arrival at Heathrow, and then 25C as the flight number, as the seat number. Sorry.
Seat number.
And if we go to page 5, we may be able to see the location of that seat on the plane.
Yes, near the back, and then from the bottom of the screen, it's the seat nearest the aisle in the middle there on the row that says 25.
On the left-hand side of the plane, is that right?
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
And if we could just skim through pages 6 to 10 of this document, please. So we're going to see that it says passenger list, and there are names redacted. If we keep going through. Could you confirm whether the investigation conducted checks in relation to persons who may have had contact with Julia Skripal on her journey?
Yes, we did.
And was there nothing of relevance to the investigation?
That's correct. We found nothing to indicate anything of interest to our investigation.
Thank you. We can take that down now. Having established that Julia Skripal was on a 1340 flight from Moscow to Heathrow, I'd now like to move to look at some of the findings of the investigation regarding what Julia and Sergei's phone data tells us about when she arrived in the UK. So first of all, did CTP investigate Sergei and Julia Skripal's mobile phone data as part of the investigation?
Yes, we did.
And was a mobile phone found next to Julia at the Maltings when she collapsed attributed to her?
Yes, it was, yes. I believe we called that mobile phone C in the end.
Yes, and I think we have phones belonging to Sergei as A and B, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. A was his current number, I think B was an old number.
So if we could go to INQ 005247, page 1. Could you explain, first of all, the nature of the document?
So yes, this is compiled by our digital evidence team They deal in the content of devices and also any communications we might have from communication service providers, so those people that hold information on how we use our mobile phones and account details. And they have then produced a timeline of all the activity they saw on those relevant devices.
So if we just expand 1.1, please.
From the storage on the device, did you say?
And also material held by mobile phone providers. So
Quite.
a whole variety of sources goes into, but anything digital or communications related.
Thank you.
So it says the following is a report presenting the evidentially relevant material from the digital devices and communication data relating to Sergei and Yulia Skripal obtained during Operation Wadana. Although the relevant digital and communication data has not been formally exhibited, the document compiles the information should it be required at a later date. So do you agree with that explanation of
Yes,
the
that's
document?
absolutely right.
And if we could expand 1.3 now, please. This says subscriber information and communication data was obtained for all numbers in use by Sergei and Yulia at the time of the incident. The only exception is Yulia's main number, which was provided by Beeline, a Russian network. UK roaming data for this number, however, was obtained. So does that mean the phone that was found with Yulia at the Maltings related to a Russian provider, Beeline?
Yes, that's correct. And when that phone is then on a UK network, it means we have data that shows that phone number connected, even if it's a Russian number or any other country. Yeah. It connects to our network, and it means we can record some data while it's here.
So
But what you haven't got is the material from Beeline back in Russia, is that it?
That goes back in history, so that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
But you were able to obtain the roaming data.
Yes.
And if we could go now to page 2 and paragraph 1.4 of this document. It says the information gathered from the content of the digital devices and communication data has assisted in understanding the movements and activities of Sergei and Yulia throughout the 3rd to the 4th of March. This was particularly helpful in the early stages of the investigation, when both Sergei and Yulia were unconscious. Although full accounts from both have now been obtained, the data provides helpful corroboration and evidence of their activity where Sergei and Yulia have been unable to remember or their information conflicts. Does that accurately describe the usefulness of the phone data obtained?
Yes, a really important part of a police investigation is when your victims are unable to tell you what they did, is we use every possible means to try and uncover as much information as possible. In this case, this is about using their digital footprint, and as you'll see, it wasn't just mobile phones, it was their devices as well that were held in the house, so laptops and iPads, that helped us to build a picture that we could then compare to their account when they woke up.
If we could go to page 3, is the Alcatel handset found in the dining room, Sergei Skripal's phone, the phone you referred to, phone A?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you say that was the current phone?
I think that was the current phone that we had very recent activity for Sergei recorded on.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Apple iPhone 6S found next to Yulia in the Maltings, which we've mentioned, known as phone C.
Yes, that was the one that was roaming in the UK as a Russian number.
If we could go to page 13 of the PDF of this document, it may be page 12 on internal pagination, that's it, yes. So first of all here, does the table that says Saturday the 3rd of March suggest that Sergei and Yulia's mobile phones were both in the area of Heathrow between 14:39 and 16:22?
Yes, it does.
So does that suggest that's the time period within which Yulia's flight had landed?
Yes, it does, and Sergei was in the area of Heathrow to collect her.
And what communications were there between Sergei and Yulia?
As you can see, there were a number of different calls between the two of them from about 14:39 onwards. There were a number of unanswered calls during that period of time, but this was all about when she was through security, so they could, as you heard from Mr. Cassidy earlier, drive forward and then pick her up.
So where we see 0 seconds, does that suggest a missed call or an unanswered call?
Yes, it does, yes.
If we could go to page 14, please, and paragraph 5.2. We are on that page now, yeah. The location of cell masts and the data that was obtained from E show that Yulia had landed by this point. So does that refer to a period around 1442?
Yes, it does.
If If we could turn now to the Sergei Skripal and the Cassidys, you said in your witness statement, and we've seen in this document, reference to the mobile phone identified as belonging to Sergei Skripal being found in the dining room. And was that phone, that's phone A, initially attributed to Sergei Skripal because the number was found on a business card on his person when he collapsed in the Maltings?
Yes, I believe that was the case, yes.
And did the investigation then confirm by analysing the data that it was the phone he was using on Saturday the 3rd of March?
Yes.
So if we can go to INQ 005543, page 1, could you explain the nature of this document?
Yeah, so this is one of our analysts has then taken the information that you've seen in the previous report, but also a number of other bits of information relating to analysis of Sergei's telephone and produced an analytical paper to describe what that data tells us.
So if we go to page 2, does it describe an unregistered prepaid O2 phone activated on the 26th of June 2017,
Yes.
which it says is attributed to Sergei Skripal?
Yes.
And does that report cover data between the 8th of March 2017 and the 7th of March 2018, so a year prior to the poisoning?
Yes.
And does it say there's very little communication?
Yes, it
And
describes
no-
only 200 rows of, sorry, my
Sorry,
apologies.
no.
It describes only 200 rows of data.
Is this phone A or phone B?
I believe this is phone A, sir. I'm
Right.
afraid I don't have the numbers in front of me to compare, but
Thank you.
So very little communication over the whole period, and then it says no call data for the 4th of March.
yes.
So we'll come back to the 4th of March, but staying with the events of the 3rd of March for now, could we go to INQ 006086 and enlarge paragraph 6, please? So this is a recent statement made by Sergei Skripal for the inquiry in response to a request made by an inquiry at the end of August 2024. And he says, I've been asked what means of communication I used in and around 3rd of March 2018. I remember mainly using my home telephone, a landline. I had a special card to help me save money on international calls. I do not remember the name of this card. I use this card to speak to my daughter Yulia around once every week and maybe a little more often ahead of her visits. For example, to confirm she'd bought tickets and when she'd arrive. I also had a simple mobile telephone without a big screen or access to the internet. I just used it to make calls. I did not like writing text messages. I had a fax machine at home but did not use it because it was not necessary. I know how to email, but I do not use it much. Could we go to paragraph 7 of that statement? While I just ask you, do you agree that that explanation by Sergei, that he mainly used his landline, is consistent with the analyst report finding there was little communication on the phone?
Yes, it is, yes.
Thank you. Could we have paragraph 7? Thank you. And so we heard some evidence about this morning. Here, Sergei is saying, I have been told that Mo Cassidy said in her witness statement that in the several weeks, if not months, before my daughter Yulia's visit, I had a silver touch screen smartphone, but then on the 3rd of March 2018, when we collected Yulia at the airport, I used a new cheap phone. I think Mo is confused. I have never had a smartphone and have always used similar simple models. I think I had a Nokia, a man's dark phone, not coloured. I think I changed my mobile telephone not very long before Yulia's 3rd of March 18 visit, because I was having to charge the battery on my old telephone every day. And we can take that down, thank you. Can you help us with that? We've heard this morning the evidence of Ross Cassidy
Yes.
indicating what he understood from his wife and about Sergei having a new phone. Could you explain?
Yes,
what
I
your
think that's
findings
absolutely right. And it's also something that I know Yulia has spoken about before as well, that Sergei was not too good with technology. So he kept very simple phones, didn't have smartphones, often used his home phone. And as you just heard from himself there, did very little else in terms of email or fax communication, but really just, and not even text messages really. So very limited use of his mobile phone, but common use of his landline.
And so did you find he had a smartphone or just the handheld ones he's described, the simpler
just
models?
what he would describe as more simple models.
And the one that was found in the house, which you called A, is the one, if he's right, which he says he's recently bought.
We weren't able to actually identify when he bought
No, no.
it. It's from him, but yes, sir, it would appear to be the most recent one he was using more regularly that he had just bought.
Do they change hands second hand sometimes?
I think he bought this one new, actually, and from
Right.
his statement, sir. I think he went to the shop in town and bought it new.
Thank you.
So returning to the 3rd of March, we've seen the table that suggested that Sergei Skripal's mobile phone was shown in the area of Heathrow Airport between 14:39 and 16:22 on Saturday, the 3rd of March. We're now going to go to a document which I think should represent cell sighting. It is INQ 005232 and page 1. Could you just explain this document to us, please?
So this is a cell site record which shows where phones were connected. As you can see, they're in slightly different locations, and in a built-up area like Heathrow or even here in town, it's not unusual that your phone might connect to one or two different masts within a close area. So here you can see from about 14:39, Sergei's phone is in the Colnbrook area connecting to a mast, and Yulia from around about 15:36 is, sorry, that's a Sergei one at 15:36 again in the airport, clearly going forward to pick her up. And as you see, Yulia's are connecting at a mast at Heathrow Airport.
Have we got Julia's on this diary?
Oh, sorry, no, they're all Sergei.
These
so
all saying,
apologies.
yes.
Sorry.
So the Colnbrook, is that consistent with the evidence we heard this morning from Ross Cassidy about parking in that area
Yes,
for a period
it
of
is.
time?
Yes.
And then do they move later on towards Heathrow, as described by him, towards the terminal?
Yes, that's correct. So you heard they held off in a sort of staging area where they didn't want to pay for parking. So in those contacts between Sergei and Yulia, they then were called forward, if you like, and drove to the car park, and these phone masts show that timing of that journey.
So although your phone can connect to different masts, here it looks specifically as if when they're in the Colnbrook area, they're connecting to a mast near there, and
Yes.
then when they move to Terminal 4,
They're
connects
in
there.
the terminal. Yes.
If we could then go to the Verbasco report, paragraph 50, and enlarge it, it's INQ 005820, please. So this is the police Verbasco report summarising that Sergei Skripal was not at home during the suspect's reconnaissance on Saturday, the 3rd of March 2018, having travelled to London Heathrow Airport with his friends Ross and Maureen Cassidy in order to greet his daughter Yulia Skripal upon her arrival from Russia.
Yes.
The Cassidys arrived at 47 Christie Miller Road to take Sergei Skripal to the airport around 1 o'clock.
Yes.
So consistent with what we've heard this morning.
Yes.
In due course, we'll hear evidence that Petrov and Bosharov were in Salisbury on the Saturday, the 3rd of March, in the period when Sergei and Yulia were in the area of Heathrow Airport.
Yes.
We are now, however, going to go to an audiovisual presentation, which is similar to the one we looked at in your previous evidence in relation to Dawn Sturgess and Charlie Rowley's movements. But this time, we're going to see the movements of the Skripals on the 3rd of March. Can you confirm, first of all, that this is a compilation of key moments taken from more extensive CCTV that was obtained during the investigation?
Yes, that's correct. It is.
Thank you. And if we could play from 0028 to 0327, please.
On Saturday, the 3rd of March 2018, Yulia Skripal entered the UK via London Heathrow Airport. At 14:54, she walked through Terminal 4. She collected her baggage at 16:29, entering the arrivals area a few minutes later. She walked through the crowd to greet Sergei Skripal. At 16:38, Yulia Skripal left the airport, walking next to Ross Cassidy, followed by Sergei Skripal. They joined Maureen Cassidy at the ticket machine. The group then drove to Christine Miller Road in Ross Cassidy's vehicle.
We could pause there, thank you. So just to recap on the timings there, we've seen at 14:54 Yulia arriving off the plane into Heathrow Terminal 4,
Yes,
16:29 collecting her baggage,
correct.
16:34 she meets Sergei Skripal,
Yes,
16:38 she leaves the terminal building with Ross Cassidy and Sergei Skripal,
yes,
16:39 she meets Maureen Cassidy at the ticket machine, and the Cassidys and the Skripals leave the airport in Ross Cassidy's vehicle, travelling to Christie Miller Road.
yes. And we saw the CCTV earlier of Mr. Cassidy's vehicle leaving about 6 minutes later.
Yes, and we may come back to that image. But there is, first of all, just one issue I'd like to address with you in terms of the journey from Heathrow to Christie Miller Road. Mr. O'Connor asked Mr. Cassidy about it this morning, and you deal with it at paragraph 192 of your witness statement. You say, and I'll read the relevant
Just let's find it, please,
Of
Ms.
course.
Whitelaw, if you don't mind. 192.
192B of Commander
Yes,
Murphy's
I've
witness
seen
statement.
it. It's just a question of raising it at the right time in the right screen. Yes, thank you.
So I'll read the relevant section. On the 10th of March 2018, Ross Cassidy, and there's an INQ reference, 5774 is the end of it, and Maureen Cassidy, INQ 005283, reported that a black BMW and a white BMW were seen on the M3 near Basingstoke when they were driving back from Heathrow with Yulia and Sergei Skripal. They thought they were undercover police vehicles. Could you tell us, please, Commander Murphy, what inquiries were undertaken in response to this report, and with what results, please?
Yes, thank you. Obviously, this was a very interesting report from Mr. Cassidy for us. So we conducted a number of inquiries, but we were able to confirm Mr. Cassidy suggested they were police vehicles, and they were indeed Hampshire police vehicles. But at this moment in time, they were driving between custody suites, so they were going to Basingstoke to visit a custody suite with prisoners on a matter that's not relevant to this inquiry. So they were on-duty vehicles, driven by police officers, but for an entirely another purpose, heading towards a custody suite.
And I believe in your witness statement, you indicate that you did obtain further details of the vehicles, and it was noted that they had dash cam footage which could be provided if verification were needed.
Yes.
So did the investigation satisfy itself that this was entirely unconnected to Mr. Skripal?
Yes, that's correct. Entirely unconnected.
If we could move now then to the arrival back at Christie Miller Road, and firstly, if we could go to INQ 005694, page 1. is this an Operation Caterva, so the investigation into the suspect's log of CCTV?
Yes, it is.
If we go to page 5, paragraphs, I'll start with 12. If we could enlarge paragraph 12, please, thank you. At 16:38:11, Julia Skripal walked into view of a camera covering exit doors, pointing to outside the terminal building, noted as the far west lower ground entrance. She walked alongside Ross Cassidy and with Sergei Skripal slightly behind, dragging her suitcase. The walk towards a car park machine at 16:39:20, where Maureen Cassidy is paying for their parking ticket. They then all walk off together. So does paragraph 12 confirm what we've just seen on the audiovisual presentation on the CCTV?
Yes, it does. Yes.
And paragraph 13, if we could enlarge that, thank you. At 16:45:27, Ross Cassidy's silver Isuzu pickup can be seen to leave exit 2 of Heathrow car park. Sergei Skripal can be seen sat in the back seat as the vehicle drives out. So does that paragraph record that CCTV was obtained showing that at 16:45 Ross Cassidy's vehicle leaves Heathrow?
Yes.
And if we go to INQ 005819, page 48 of the graphics pack, page 48 of that document. Is that the image we've seen this morning of the vehicle leaving the airport?
Yes, the one on the top right. Yes.
And that's about 16:45.
Yes.
So, apologies for jumping around. If we could then go back to INQ 005694, page 5, the Caterva CCTV log.
Yeah.
If we could enlarge paragraph 14, please. This says at 17:53:14, the camera was recorded as being 3 minutes 30 seconds slow on the trawl sheet, and the time recorded on footage was 17:49:44. Ross Cassidy's silver Isuzu pickup is sighted travelling northwest along Devizes Road, Salisbury, past the Devizes Inn.
Yes.
So what's the real time?
If it's slightly slow, so it's actually just before 1800 hours, so would be 17:56
Thank you very
and
much.
44 seconds.
Thank you, well done.
So there, do we see the investigations recovered CCTV showing the vehicle travelling northwest along Devizes Road, Salisbury, past Devizes Inn?
Yes.
And then paragraph 15, please. At 18:01:18, actual time unknown, as no record of discrepancy, though believed to be no more than 10 minutes out, Ross Cassidy's silver Isuzu pickup is seen passing by 294 Devizes Road, Salisbury.
Yes, that's correct.
And then paragraph 16, at approximately 18:06 hours, the camera was recorded as being 1 hour 22 minutes fast on the trawl sheet, and the time recorded on footage was 19:28. We've heard about that. Ross Cassidy's silver Isuzu pickup is seen travelling southwest on India Avenue towards Christie Miller Road. This is the last sighting of Sergei and Julia Skripal on CCTV on Saturday, the 3rd of March. So is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So that's the image we saw earlier. Mr. Cassidy was shown of his vehicle going past the house, and is entirely consistent with the return journey and re-entering Salisbury and us then picking them up on CCTV again in Salisbury.
And have I got it right? India Avenue runs very roughly at right angles to Devizes Road.
Yes, that's correct.
And if you were going to Christie Miller Road, Miller Road, you could easily go that way.
Yes, so I believe if you turn left off Devizes Road into India Avenue, and then you turn left into Christie Miller Road.
Thank you.
Christie Miller Road.
So in terms of the arrival back at Christie Miller Road, first of all, we've looked at what we have in terms of CCTV, both the video presentations and the log. Second of all, if we go back to the document we've seen, that's page 48 of the graphics pack, INQ 005819. So image 1, we saw Ross Cassidy's vehicle leaving Christie Miller Road with Sergei Skripal, and the correct time should be 13:02:50. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then have we seen images 2, 3 and 4 in the audio-visual presentation?
Yes.
Would I think the correct times on those? And then image 5, should the correct time read 18:06?
Yes, I believe 18:06 and 10 seconds.
10 seconds, thank you. And does that show Ross Cassidy's vehicle driving along India Avenue towards Christie Miller Road?
Yes.
So thirdly, in terms of evidence regarding the arrival back to Christie Miller Road, if we could go to the Operation Wadana communications report, which was at INQ 005247 and page 18. Paragraph 5.4 at the bottom there, do we see from the Operation Wadana communications report that at 5.4 it says, following their return to Christie Miller Road, Yulia's iPhone auto-connects to Sergei's Wi-Fi router at 18:10:50.
Yes, that's correct.
So does that suggest then that Yulia was at Christie Miller Road by 18:10 in the evening on Saturday the 3rd of March 2018?
Yes, entirely consistent with pretty much all of their recording, although some of the times might vary. We know definitely that it was 18:10 when Yulia's phone connected to the Wi-Fi in the house, which demonstrates they've arrived back.
And do we know if that she's inside the property by then, or if the phone
I
if
think
it
this
previously...
is the, sorry, my apologies for interrupting. I think this is the time at which they've arrived back. They're moving into the house. That Maureen is helping with the luggage, and that's the point at which her phone will connect.
And is that consistent with the evidence of Ross Cassidy that we've heard in relation to timings and the CCTV?
It is, yes.
A further piece of different type of evidence?
Yes.
Going to look now at the moments of arrival and the opening of the door. Do you agree that the significance of that is potentially because it assists in establishing when Novichok was placed on the door handle?
Yes, there is something called clean dirty line. So in a chemical, biological and radiological incident, we have something called a clean dirty line, a point at which we know whether something is or is not contaminated. We adopted that language very clearly in this investigation to try and find the earliest point at which contamination was not believed to be present on the door, and the information from Maureen, Ross, Sergei and Yulia and the activity that they all went through this evening in arriving back at the house is part of that essential part of understanding when we can say for sure that there wasn't any Novichok on that door handle.
So you're looking for, did you say the latest time at which there's still no sign of
Yes,
contamination?
Yes. When can we show in evidence that contamination was not present?
Yeah.
To help us with the relevant time period for us to focus our investigative effort.
I see.
So by reference to paragraph 113 of your witness statement, when they arrived back at the property, what had Yulia said in interview about who opened the door?
So Yulia confirmed that when they arrived back on that Saturday evening, coming back, that Sergei opened the door when he first went into the premises.
Okay. So we're going to look at a few accounts in relation to this now. First of all, INQ 005760, page 1. Do you recognise this as a police interview with Yulia Skripal took place on the 16th of April 2018?
Yes.
And if we go to page 23, where Yulia is speaking about her arrival home to Christie Miller Road on the Saturday the 3rd of March, where the interviewer, VN308, says, so you've got your suitcase. Who brings your suitcase into the house? Julia says, my dad. And how does he get into the house? Julia says he opened the door. He had the key to the house, so yes, he opened the door to let everyone in. Mo went inside to use the loo, so that's Maureen Cassidy, is it?
Yes, that is.
VN308 continues, yeah. Julia says, me inside, Ross was waiting in the car. Again, consistent with the evidence that we've heard this morning.
Yes.
Okay, so, and where were they going? Back to their house. Okay, so literally just dropping you off. Yes. And they live 2 minutes around the corner. Yes, they just up the street. There you go. Okay, so you got into the house, and just then, when you said you had the keys, you did the action. So tell me how your dad got into the house. And Julia says there, well, he needs the door handle, of course, because to use the keys, you need to press the handle down.
Yes, so this is one of those pretty standard UPVC front doors where in order to lock the door, you lift the handle up, which activates the locking mechanism, it lets you turn the key, and then in order to then turn the key back, I imagine you need to slightly change the handle's location to do that, but of course you will need to pull the handle down to then open the door, which is what Sergei appears to do in this case.
So continuing on with this account, okay, and open the door, and the door opens outwards towards you. Yep, and describe the door for me. It's a modern, new door, white plastic one with a modern handle. When you close it, you need to push it, close and down. Is that what you're describing?
Well, when you close it, I think you might need to lift the handle down to close the door, and then the handle will pop back up to the mid-range where it then stays shut. But to lock it, you clearly lift the handle and turn the key.
But in either event, certainly needing to have contact with the door handle in order to open and close it.
Yes.
And then moving on to page 24, where she's talking about the colour of the door handle and the porch, and then further down, VN308 a bit, and then have you got another front door then? Julia says, yes, inside, officer, with another key, yes, but usually we don't close it.
Yes, so this is so the main door on the outside, the UPVC door with the locking mechanism I just described, is like a porch door, really. You then move into the house into a small porch area where you have another interior door. So almost two front doors. That door is often left open in Julia's evidence.
So she's saying they lock the outer door but not the inner door.
Yes.
And then if we move, that interview continues, and we move down to the part where VN308 says, okay, and then the door that you said that you don't normally lock, describe that for me. Just an old wooden door with glass, so it's like windows in upper and underneath, so it's just wooden, but it's not transparent, you know, it's just glass, like white one, like a shower glass. And then moving down to page 25, the interviewer says, and so on that Saturday evening, did your dad use the key to get into the second door, can you remember? Julia says, second door, no, because we never lock it. He said, okay, and how do you get into that? It has a round handle, you just twist it, but it opens inwards. And then further down, the interviewer says, okay, and you didn't use a key, you went straight in. No, front of you, in front of me. And then Mo off to the loos. And then is that it? Yeah, that's it. So your dad's got your case, has he? Yes. Where does he put that? He took it directly to my bedroom on the second floor. So from this, do you agree that Julia's account, which is obviously nearer to the time of events, was clear that once they'd arrived home at about, we've seen, just after 6 on Saturday night, Sergei Skripal touched the exterior door handle to open the door, and
Yes.
Julia and Maureen Cassidy followed him in.
Yes, that's correct.
So if we next go to Maureen Cassidy's witness statement of the 10th of March, INQ 005283, page 11. I won't read this out again, but if we can highlight that first paragraph. This is the one that Mr. O'Connor read this morning, whereby Maureen Cassidy was explaining how Sergei took the suitcase from her and opened the front door to the house. Then Julia was behind him, was busy with the cat, so she walked past and they went up to the bathroom and she took the picture of the shower on her phone.
Yes.
And then if we could go to another statement of Maureen Cassidy on the 9th of May, this is INQ 004475, page 1. The second paragraph, if we could make that slightly larger. In relation to the interactions I remember with the Skripal's front door once we arrived at their house on Saturday the 3rd of March 2018, I'd like to add some more detail. I remembered the door opening inwards because Sergei had got to the front of the house very quickly from the car and opened the outer door. This was already open by the time I was stood by the doors. I recall seeing him unlock the inner door while I was stood behind him. Both doors were left ajar as I went into the house. Yulia, his daughter, was petting the cat inside. When I was leaving the house, I pushed the outer door closed with the outside handle. I'm fairly sure it was Sergei who pushed shut the inner door as I left. The inner handle wasn't likely to have been touched by them until the morning of Sunday the 4th of March, because I believe they stayed in that evening and would not have had reason to use the inner door handles. So although slightly confusing about the two doors and the in and out, in that statement, is she making clear that she touched the outer door with the outer handle when she left?
So that is the case, yes. From her recollection, she stepped out through the open inner door into that porch area, then stepped outside of the porch and then closed the door behind her, which, as we described earlier, would have required the UPVC door being pushed shut and the handle being operated to make sure it closed.
And finally, as regards Maureen Cassidy's evidence on this point, if we could go to her recent statement, INQ 005998, page 1. And again, we looked at this morning. And it's paragraph, first of all, paragraph 2, it refers to the previous statement we've just had a look at, saying, I said that when I was leaving the Skripal's house at 47 Christie Miller Road on Saturday the 3rd of March, I pushed the outer door closed with the outer door handle. I've been asked if I remember how I touched the outer door handle and whether I held the handle with my hand. And then paragraph 3, which we saw again this morning, the inside front door opened inwards into the house. The outside door opened outwards towards the front garden. When I was leaving, both doors were open and I shut the outer door only by pushing it closed. I cannot remember if I touched the handle. Normally it would have been Sergei closing the door, not me, but if I was closing the door, then I would have pushed the outer door shut using the handle. I can confirm that after I left on that occasion, I did not go back into the Skripal's house again on the 3rd or 4th of March. I was not unwell that day or the following day, and I was not tested for the presence of Novichok. So here, obviously, the statement made much later, some years later, so not remembering at that point, but referencing her previous statement where she thought she touched the outer door handle, but also confirming that she didn't go back to the property after that and
Yes.
didn't suffer any symptoms of being unwell.
Yes, and we did a number of other inquiries, which I think we'll deal with later, but relating to the vehicle, for example, to demonstrate that there was no Novichok on Maureen at that time.
That's the Cassidy's vehicle.
Yes.
We are going to come back in the inquiry to where precisely different amounts of Novichok were found, but for now, just to establish the movements of everybody to assist in that analysis later on. So in your witness statement, you summarised the significance of this at paragraph 102, when you said one of them, the Cassidys you're referring to, had entered the premises with the Skripals for a few moments. Neither the Skripals nor the Cassidys appear to have been affected by Novichok overnight. So could you explain, by reference to that paragraph of your witness statement, what that meant in terms of setting the parameters for when the Novichok was placed on the door handle?
So as I described earlier, a clean dirty line is something in a chemical, biological, radiological incident that describes the process by which we know something to be contaminated and something to be clean, so we can make sure we manage the safety of everybody. In an investigative context here, what we've done is adopt that terminology to say, okay, so everything we've now done and we've just been through in relation to Maureen and the Skripal's movements suggests that At 18:10, when they returned to the premises at Christie Miller Road, there was no Novichok on the door handle at that moment in time. And when Maureen left and closed the door behind her and they left with Mr. Cassidy into their vehicle, they were not contaminated with Novichok. Now that gave me my sort of, if you like, my latest clean time of around about 1800 hours, on which I knew there was no Novichok on that door handle.
Yeah.
So the next period of time that we're coming to look at is overnight at Christie Miller Road. And in terms of what the Skripals did after they arrived home, was Sergei Skripal asked about that in an interview?
He was, yes.
And if we could go to INQ 005750, page 6, which is an interview with Sergei Skripal on the 23rd of May. Sorry, we can go to the last entry on page 4, actually. So here we see in the last entry, Sergei, you've talked to us yesterday, well, you've talked to us previously about when you come into the house taking off coats, hanging them up. So if you could please give that some thought as well about what order you did things in and where you put things, that would help as well, please. And Sergei Skripal. If we could go over the page, please. It says, yeah, we used guest toilet. And he demonstrates in the interview where that was in the house. He mentions Yulia's luggage, we can see about halfway down. And if we could go to the bottom of the page, do we see he's talking about his living room or lounge area? Can you see that? Come on.
Yes. Sorry, yes.
And going to page 6 then, and partway down, Sergei Skripal says, so the table, the glasses was here, and we drank and some more beer and some wine, but I do not remember when, because it's normal, you know, I was happy, daughter here drinking, I was very happy, nothing can think about poison. And then the interviewer says, but you mentioned the television, and Sergei Skripal says remote control on the table, switched on, didn't watch TV. You didn't just switch on, but it's working, but we speaking, not watch. Just I ask about life plans in the car, got to repeat some questions. So do you understand from that Sergei's indicating that he and Yulia sat in the living room after they came home, drank some beer and wine?
Yes, that's correct.
And then he switched on the television using the remote control, but didn't really watch television because they were talking.
Yes.
That's your understanding of his account.
Yes.
And if,
sorry to interrupt. I believe also they had some dinner that evening as well at home.
Thank you. And if we could go to INQ 005751, an interview on the 24th of May, page 2. Still looking at some of the movements. Yeah, so that's 24th of May, page 2. And about halfway down, come on, Murphy, if you just have a read of that to yourself where it says, and so yesterday at home, to the bottom of the page.
Yes.
Did he say in that interview that he took some tablets which were in a drawer in a cabinet against the wall?
Yes, he does.
So here, just looking at the items that he may have touched that evening when he came home and what they were doing in the evening. It is downstairs in the property.
Yes.
If we then go back to INQ 005750, and page 4 this time, so this is the 23rd of May interview that we've seen. If we go to page 4, and partway down there's a paragraph of Sergei Skripal speaking where he says, so we came, this toilet, eating, place cat, I didn't touch, so I visit this room, marking on exhibit, put luggage to the bed. So we've heard accounts of him taking Yulia's luggage upstairs,
Yes.
and that seems to be him suggesting that that's what he did.
Yeah.
And then he refers to, I switch on the lamp in my bed, end of my bed.
Yes.
And then slightly further down in that paragraph, before I go to bed, I visit the toilet. I was in the toilet, in the shower as well. Don't remember how I doing, but I know absolutely automatically every morning, evening, I have a shower. So did you understand from Sergei Skripal's accounts of his movements that he took Yulia's luggage up to her room and he took a shower in the evening,
Yes.
and indeed the next morning, and that he didn't touch the bedroom light, but he switched on a lamp by his bed?
Correct.
So were his precise movements relevant later when the investigation came to compare where Novichok was found in the house or not?
Yes, absolutely. So it was really important for us to understand the levels of contamination in the house, which I know we'll speak about later. So understanding our forensic results of the examination of the house together with Sergei and Yulia's account was really important.
I've touched upon the Skripal's accounts of what they did after they returned home to Christie Miller Road on the evening of Saturday the 3rd of July. Is there anything you would like to add at this stage in that regard before we move on to Sunday morning?
So on the Saturday night also we were able to identify some digital footprints of what they were doing while they were home as well, which indicated, of course, they were using their devices while they were at home. They prepared some food, I believe, that evening. In fact, I think Yulia mentioned, I apologise, my Russian is terrible, but I think it was a Russian version of like a pasta dish, a ravioli dish. So they spent a good deal of time together that evening, sir, and were on their devices, and I think went to bed around about 10. There's various times potentially, but sometime between 10 and midnight.
So both their accounts and the information from digital devices you were
Yes.
able to obtain, suggesting to the investigation that they stayed at Christie Miller Road overnight.
Yes.
Was there any evidence that they did anything else overnight, as in leave the property at any stage?
No, there was no evidence of that at all.
So then moving to the movements of the Skripals on Sunday, the 4th of March. During the morning of the 4th of March, was there activity both on Yulia's MacBook computer and Sergei's desktop almost continuously from about 8:30 in the morning?
Yes, there was, yes.
Was that consistent with when they said they got up in the morning?
Yes, I think they got up at slightly different times from each other, but yes, it's entirely consistent with their account and the fact they were in the house all morning.
So if we could go to INQ 005247, please. This is again the Operation Wadana Digital Evidence Communications Data Report. And if we go to page 20, yes, we're on it already, thank you very much. Do we see there Yulia's computer activity between 8:36 a.m. and 1:04 p.m?
Yes, we do.
For example, she looks like she's watching YouTube and online shopping.
Yes, correct.
And then if we go over to page 21, similarly from 9:13 to 1:10, do we see activity on Sergei's desktop?
Yes, we do. Yes,
And that seems to be accessing online banking, Google, YouTube.
correct.
Now, there seems to be a gap between a search conducted at 9:52, Russian Google search, and the next period of accessing YouTube at 10:56 to 12:43. If we go to page 23, does it look as though that within that gap of computer activity, that may have been when the phone call was received from Ross Cassidy?
Yes, it does, yes. And we also know that morning that, of course, they both made breakfast and were in the house eating that day as well.
So that was the phone call we've heard about which I think Ross Cassidy's statement indicates they would have talked about Sergei and Yulia's plans for the day to have lunch in Salisbury and if they had time to meet them at the Railway Club later on.
Correct.
And if we could go to INQ 005775.
Just before you leave that page, can I just be sure I understand it? What's the figure to the right of 103240?
That is the amount, the length of time of the call, sir. So
And it's, what, 15 minutes or what?
1 minute 15 seconds. I
Oh,
believe
1 minute
that's,
15.
yes.
Thank
Yes,
you.
it does look as if it might be an hour, 15
Yes.
minutes
Well, no,
otherwise.
It's not. It's just 1 minute 15.
A short.
Thank you.
And it references in that document the shower, so the
Yes.
call potentially about their plans and the fixing of the shower that we've heard evidence about.
Yes.
Thank you. And then next, the document INQ 005775, page 1, first of all. And could you explain, this is a new document to us, the nature of that, please?
Yes, thank you. So this is a timeline of everything we knew about their movement. So as we got to the start of the inquiry, more and more information became available. It was important for us to take sort of significant parts of the inquiry. So in this case, Sergei and Yulia and their vehicle, and our activity as police officers, and try and map it in a timeline so we could see where key things happened along a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And each of the coloured lines, what do they represent?
The coloured lines all represent the different individuals. So if you see the top line infers that this is evidence we have from a digital source. The blue line, the second one down, is Sergei's line, so he's in blue for. So every activity along his line is something we can evidence that Sergei was doing. And then as you go down, you'll see the same. It's Yulia in, forgive me, I think that's a purple colour. The police activity is in a black line, and then the green activity at the bottom is the BMW, which is Sergei and Yulia's car.
Thank you. And if we go to page 6, please. And enlarge the box, the first box on the second line down. Does that refer to the phone call which Ross Cassidy initially thought he'd made in the evening, and then we see the time in the amended statement between 10 and 11, and we've seen 10:32 was the digital evidence?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
And if we go to page 4, please. And if we can make the line for Sergei Skripal larger so that we can just see, does this show Sergei Skripal's computer being used as described in the Wadana report that we've been to, the communications report, through the morning of the 4th of March?
Yes, so this is the orange line, which refers to a digital tracing footprint from one of the digital devices. But yes, you can see then that that morning you can see various activity on Sergei's computers.
I think on page 4 we can see that bank account
Yeah.
access, and then pages 5 and 7 email on the same line. We just go to page 5 and then page 7.
Yes, you can see the time along the top there. And then, again, this is still digital activity.
And we can just see from the representation that it's more or less continuous through the morning.
Yes, that's correct.
Well,
Thank you. And then to page 7. And then if we could, when we're ready, take that document down. And we're next going to go to INQ 005247, page 23. So back to the report we've been looking at, and we've seen reference to that call, and then we see 6.6. There is then no further relevant activity on Sergei and Yulia's devices or within the communication data until after they are found in the maltings. All information thereafter is either generic network activity or missed phone calls. Does that refer to the data within the report, so the last entry being on the previous page at 1310?
Yes. Bless you.
Thank you.
Which is entirely in keeping with 1310 when they, sometime around past, they then leave the house, but clearly they're getting ready to go at that point.
So did the investigation then conclude the Skripals were at their home address from the time Ross and Maureen Cassidy dropped them off the night before until they left to go to the town centre on the 4th of March at around lunchtime, 1 o'clock?
Yes.
1:30, I think.
Correct,
evening.
1:30, yes.
And is that also consistent with what Sergei and Yulia Skripal have told the investigation?
It is.
If we go to their most recent statements prepared for the inquiry, first of all, Sergei Skripal's at INQ 006086, page 4, and if we can enlarge the first 5 lines of paragraph 13, please. So here Sergei is saying, my main memory is that I woke up before Yulia, showered, shaved, went downstairs for a light breakfast. I went outside to change the direction of the BMW. The weather was better with less snow, so I got ready to drive us to the centre of Salisbury for lunch. I stayed at home all morning and did not drive anywhere until we got ready to set off to go for lunch together. Yulia never drove the car at all on her March 2018 visit. And if we take that down, we'll come back to that again. But we'll take it down for now, thank you. And we're going to go to now Yulia's account, INQ 006087, page 5, also paragraph 13. And if we can just enlarge the first 2 lines. Paragraph 13, enlarge the first 2 lines, please, thank you. I did not leave the house on the 4th of March 2018 before my dad and I took the car into Salisbury city centre together for lunch. As far as I'm aware, neither did my dad. Now, we can take that down, thank you. Commander Murphy, by reference to paragraph 102 of your witness statement, given that we know the Skripals arrived home at 47 Christie Miller Road at about 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 4th of March, with the Cassidys, who weren't poisoned, and then, too, they were at home until they left at lunchtime on Sunday, the 4th of March, what did Operation Wadana conclude about when the Novichok is likely to have been placed on the door handle?
Yes, thank you. So one of the additional bits of information we had was if you'd come into contact with Novichok, it could take a period of time by which you would be contaminated. Seeing as they were not ill, and that was a 4 to 6 hour period, seeing as at no time did they get ill on the Saturday night, having returned home at 1800 hours, that the Cassidys were not contaminated. I basically set the time parameters of when the Novichok was likely to have been applied to that door as 1800 on the Saturday and 13:30 on the Sunday when they then left. That was a period that allowed us to focus our inquiry into that slightly smaller period to identify what happened.
We'll come to the more specific timings when we deal with the movements of the suspects. Sir, I am about to go on to leaving home for the day, but I wonder if that would be an appropriate moment to break for lunch. I'm conscious it's
If that
5
fits
minutes
the way you're
early.
dealing with the evidence, Ms. Whitelaw, yes, of course it is. We'll take an hour now then, so we'll start again at 1:45. All right, Mr. Thank you very much.
All rise.